voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, even though on this show I mainly talk about geopolitics or medical freedom or the global economy, I'm also really passionate about all the other things in this world that are being hidden from us. Ancient civilizations, hidden treatments, how we've cured the body for thousands of years from certain things that now scientists can't figure out how to even breach the subject of talking about. There's so much knowledge and information out there that I believe has been hidden from us. And if you look at our current news and you look at really, especially since 2016 when Trump came in and brought in the whole idea of fake news, well, a lot of people have come to the realization that, wow, our news is actually propaganda and it's fake. Well, if you extrapolate a little bit and you say, okay, well, who's controlling the news? Like, oh, it's the same people that actually run the pharmaceutical industry. It's the same people that, wow, actually that run the Department of Education, that run the companies that publish our textbooks, the companies that produce documentaries about our history. You start tracing it back and you start to think about, it's like, well, if our news is fake, what about the history that I've been told? What about this worldview that I have that's been programmed in me through television programming, television programming? And that's where I love asking the questions because when you look at events such as the recent discovery of these supposed pillars under the Giza plateau and other pyramids out there, which if you haven't seen that yet, you'll learn a lot about it in this episode. These are events and this is information that comes out that I think is really important because it has us collectively asking, whoa, like this history that you've been telling me isn't actually true. Because as much as they've told us, say that take the pyramids as an example, they told us a story how these pyramids were built by the slaves and they had these pulley systems and they cut these big stones and they stacked them all together, yet they just so happen to be perfectly aligned to the stars and aligned perfectly with pyramids that were, thousands of miles away and different civilizations. You look at this information, it's like, well, there's no way that's real. And then you start diving and the whole idea of a hidden history or ancient civilizations, especially the idea that these old civilizations were perhaps far more advanced than our current civilization. That stuff gets me really excited and interesting. Or getting into the idea of Tartaria. Like, okay, was there this civilization known as Tartaria that had very advanced technology that were harnessing energy from the sky and from the earth? Interesting stuff. But they don't want us looking there because they want us to be stuck in this modern paradigm where how do you get energy? Well, you build these massive solar fields and you collect energy, or you build these big wind turbines, or you have to dredge up this oil that's a non-renewable resource. In my opinion, these are all lies that we've been told. And that as you start to uncover these lies, what's amazing to me is that for me at least, it brings me closer to God. It brings me closer to this place where I'm like, gosh, this world, we're not just these meat puppets walking around. There is something very profound about the human body and about the human history and getting back into the pre-flood civilizations. I mean, to me, it's exciting. And so my guest today is a guy named Jay Anderson, who I only recently came across his work because he was doing a lot of research on the pyramids as these discoveries were coming out. And we're just going to have a free-flowing conversation and just dig into this whole idea that there are potentially these advanced civilizations before us and that there are all kinds of artifacts left on Earth that we can't possibly explain or even recreate with our so-called super advanced technology that we've evolved from monkeys into being able to, we can create robots or put brain chips in our heads. It's like, well, what if 1,000 years ago they were doing things way more advanced? But what if that technology's been hidden? And what if there are organizations, CIA, OSS, Smithsonian, that have actually been proactively hiding this information from us? Well, how I am, since I was a little kid, if you say, Seth, don't look there, don't touch there, I'm looking there and I'm touching there. So that's what this interview is. It's taking a look at the places that they don't want us to look. So please enjoy the interview with Jay Anderson. Gold has surged 46% in less than a year. doubling the gains of the Nasdaq and the S&P 500. But this isn't just another rally. Global reserves are shifting, exposing cracks in the monetary system. Investors are losing confidence in paper gold and demanding physical metal, creating a massive gap between gold owed and gold available. But this isn't about how institutions broke another system. It's about how you can profit from it. Right now, Noble Gold Investments has a limited supply of investment-grade gold bars and coins available. As banks scramble to fulfill their obligations, pushing gold prices higher, you can profit. Smart investors are already moving into physical gold. Noble Gold Investments makes it easy for you to do the same. And right now, when you make a qualified investment, Noble Gold will add a free 10th ounce gold coin to your order. Don't wait until it's too late. Visit goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 now and turn their panic into your profit. Again, that's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. You'll find that information in the description for the show as well. Mr. Jay Anderson, it's good to have you on, man. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Seth, great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I first came across your account in the past month or so, surrounding all this huge discovery of these pillars beneath the pyramid, and I very quickly was like just kind of digging through your Twitter feed, thinking, okay, this guy's like, okay, he's on some cool stuff, and even though on my show I talk a lot about geopolitics and health freedom and everything, I'm also mildly obsessed with hidden history, ancient architecture, previous and hidden civilizations, giants and giant graves, and the Nephilim, and what were the Egyptians really doing, and who really built the pyramids, and so these things really fascinate me, and I'm going to be doing more shows on this kind of stuff. And I've seen the quote a few different times and phrased a few different way, but it's like if our news is fake, imagine what our history is, right? Because like, you see how fake our news is. Well, it's like, okay, well, the same people and institutions that are feeding us fake news are the same ones that run our medical schools. Okay, there are all kinds of lies there, but they're also the same ones that own the Smithsonian and the museums and rewrite the history books and a lot of the religious books. And so you start diving into this rabbit hole, and it's just like, gosh, what even is real? So anyway, I'll let you go ahead and start to introduce yourself, and then we'll just dive in and to see where this rabbit hole takes us.
Yeah, man. I mean, I completely agree. And I mean, it's a well known saying history is written by the victor. But I think that it's only really in the modern era now when people have even the ability to challenge history in the way that it's being challenged because of the alternative research space, because of the fact that information can be shared so quickly across the internet. You know, you think about all of the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years where that wasn't possible, and it was very easy to contain and suppress and censor, and as you said, there's theological consequences with the rise of institutional religions, monotheistic religions, and powerful entities that have a vested interest in a narrative, like their own narrative, and will and have demonstrably through history uh, you know aided in the suppression of information that contradicts that narrative. So, me personally, when it comes to what I do, I tend to follow my intuition. I've got the habit of focusing intensely on a certain subject before switching to something else and then returning back again. And this is the process through which I kind of present myself publicly via my research. I cover a lot of subjects. I got a particular focus on consciousness. I'm fascinated by the anomalous events, the paranormal events that people have experienced, myself included. And these interests have also led me down many different corridors of insight and intrigue, from quantum mechanics and biology to ufology, prehistory, which is something that I'm currently hyper fascinated with, and especially given the recent claims surrounding the Giza Plateau. And of course, even like yourself, I keep up with the geopolitics, the culture wars, the volatile ocean of political discourse that is our modern era, because that's something else to plug into and keep an eye on. And I've got many friends who are involved in the artificial intelligence world. And, I like to speak about the implications of that emerging paradigm shift as well. So, I've researched a lot of things, the occult, the secret societies and mystery schools of the world. I've traveled to fascinating places and documented those travels. So I kind of follow whatever interests me, and these various interests stem from personal experiences, really, that put me on a very different path in life, which is the path I'm on now, which I guess I would kind of say is one of knowledge gathering and knowledge sharing.
And that's it. And that's the amazing thing is that as much as I despise modern technology and I'm absolutely concerned about an AI technocratic
Right, right.
takeover of our society, the reality is that this technology allows you and I to have a conversation like this, put it up for potentially millions to see, and we can really help change the narrative. And whereas, say, 20 years ago, if something about ancient history wasn't put onto the History Channel or the Discovery Channel or something of that sort, the average person had such a hard time discovering this information. And
Yeah.
even with the recent discoveries with the guy, Giza Plateau, you would have only seen that if it was allowed to be on the headline news, say maybe 30 years ago before the internet was really what it is today, or you would have only seen it if Discovery or History Channel did a docuseries
Mhm.
on it. You wouldn't have really known about it. Whereas here we are, this information is breaking. We go from a press conference by these scientists to within days, it's all over the place. And so I guess we could start there because what the recent discoveries in Egypt, I think, have opened up a lot of people's minds to thinking about, even if they weren't before, to now thinking,
Yeah.
whoa, there's something they're not telling us about these pyramids and what is our history and were these civilizations more advanced than us? And that's one thing before I pass back over to you. That's one thing that I've come to understand is that there's a modern arrogance that we have that we think that, oh, we've got science, we've got Elon Musk, we've got robots, we're more advanced. But the more I've looked into older cultures and studied these ancient cultures, I've realized no, actually, they were the more advanced cultures. And what we've been put into is we've had this prison planet built around us. And the grand psyop part of it has been this thinking that we're the most advanced so that we don't even question what's around us, especially nor do we even look to the past for answers of what's happening now. So I'll hand that back over to you if you want to walk us through where you're at with the pyramids and just, responding overall to what I've just said.
Yeah, well, again, like you say, I'm in complete agreement, and it's refreshing to see that people are becoming more curious about looking at that prehistory. I think especially the prehistory because this is a very murky area, and this series of claims surrounding the Giza Plateau it plays into a much larger global pattern of prehistoric stone building specifically. There's a profound trail of what I would call scattered or shattered evidence for highly advanced stone building cultures. And some people may not be able to appreciate how the words highly advanced and stone building cultures can go together unless we address this larger mosaic of historical evidence that then plays directly into, I would say, the implications of this most recent study of the Kaffa pyramid and the Giza complex by Filippo Bionde and Corrado Malanga, the Italian scientists, and the claimed findings from the team. So, I mean, I'm quite obsessed with prehistoric megalithic stone building cultures all over the world. We see these examples of absolutely massive, sometimes in the hundreds of tons, massive stone building projects. This is what we're taught is the Stone Age, the Neolithic period where humans were basically just hunter gatherers. Just let me clear my throat. We've got a high pollen count right now, so I'm kind of getting the beginnings of hay fever.
Oh, well, actually, you're giving me an opportunity to
I can
play
feel
one
it
quick
tickling in my
video.
throat. Yeah, by all means, jump in.
Well, no, I want to play this. I want to show this post you put out April 8th. You said the ancients understood the profound importance of acoustics and tones. They understood how to make stones sing. This video right here, which I'll let you explain what this is, but to me, this is the pinnacle of highlighting exactly what you're saying. So this is a guy from what I've seen, I'll let you explain more, who's rubbing a stone across a stone that has this grid cut into it. Now, I don't know how old this stone is or what's going on here, but let's listen to it and I'll let you explain it after that. Now, to me, if I heard that without even knowing what it was, I think, "Oh, it's some kid learning how to play the oboe or the clarinet."
Yeah.
But so what's going on here?
Well, I mean, it's fascinating because this is something that I'm very interested in when it comes to the prehistoric and megalithic sites, is the acoustic sciences that seem to be involved and the knowledge of very sophisticated acoustic sciences and the impact on the human body and brain. But what you're seeing here is essentially it's a very simple method. You have varying degrees of depth to these grooves that are cut into the rock, and I'm not sure on the rock, but I would yeah, sorry, take a guess that it would be limestone. Limestone's a very good stone for amplifying acoustic vibration. The Greeks used limestones to construct the colosseums and to construct the amphitheaters because it just propagates acoustic waveforms very easily, so you can hear things right from the back. So this is another material that's used by so many of these prehistoric stone builders. But what you're seeing is essentially a transference of mechanical stress. So the rock is scraping against this larger, well, the stone is scraping against this larger rock with the grooves cut into it. And as the rock's vibrating and sending that vibration through these grooves, it's creating kind of a tonal sound because of this transference of mechanical stress. So it's actually very simple and you can make these quite easily, actually. But this is something that just plays into this larger pool of evidence, because what we see when we really scrutinize these ancient megaliths like Stonehenge in England or Newgrange in Ireland or somewhere I got back from recently, Malta, with the Hypogeum of Halseflieni. And in all honesty, they're all over the world, from Sacsayhuaman and Chavindahuanta in Peru to Egypt with the King's Chamber of the Pyramid and many other sites. When these sites are thoroughly examined, we see absolute precision engineering that demonstrates a highly sophisticated understanding of mathematics. We see incredible stone lifting and placement capabilities that completely contradict what we understand to have been technologically feasible at such a primal state of human development, what we assume to have been a primal state of human development. But even more impressive is we see precision celestial alignments with a lot of these structures, aligned with the solstices, the equinoxes, the precession of planets and stars. Many of these prehistoric sites, and again, this is all over the world, many of them are constructed in geophysical locations that have higher than average telluric currents, which are natural electric currents that move through the Earth's crust and oceans. And then they exhibit this kind of purposeful geometric placement and the choice of very specific building materials to produce incredible acoustic effects, naturally induced electrical effects. And this is really, really important. The deliberate acoustic tuning of these prehistoric, multi ton, precision placed, celestially aligned, planetary integrated temples and sacred sites, including the pyramids of Giza. It's a profoundly underappreciated and overlooked aspect of the evidence for what I would say is a lost civilization and a lost science that's only now beginning to be re-evidenced through the lens of our modern cultures. This is kind of bleeding edge stuff when you're looking at the acoustic effects on consciousness and the quantum effects in our own brain. And then you're looking at these prehistoric temples and you're realizing, well, they're tuned harmonically. For example, the Hypogeum of Halseflieni in Malta, tuned to 110 hertz of a male baritone voice with focalized areas where this acoustic propagation is concentrated. And if you sit there and have this, tone going over and over and kind of filling up the entire chasm, it influences your consciousness. It changes your brainwave state from alpha to theta. So, there's a lot of things going on here that indicate a profound knowledge that actually, I think begrudgingly, we don't even have ourselves. So, yeah, very advanced, but in a different way. The last thing I'll say before I let you jump in is I think that they were extremely advanced. I think there was a pre-flood civilization that survived a cataclysm and tried to rebuild, and were essentially the traumatized offspring of that ancestral time where it seems like they were using the natural materials of the planet like technologies, and they were leveraging the planet in a technological way, in a way that's very contradictory to our own avenue of development, with wires and cables and mechanics and batteries. Like, the earth was the wires and cables, the stones were the batteries. Like, it seems like a technology, but it's something that we're not accustomed to.
I couldn't agree more. And you mentioned this pre-flood civilization. I've even had the thought too, because as I've dug into even the pyramidal structures and the fact that you find these pyramids in almost every region on Earth, including I
Yeah,
think there's probably there's massive ones in Antarctica that have been hidden from us. I think there's some
no doubt.
underwater, maybe as part of like the White Pyramid of Atlantis that that exists somewhere under the ocean. Even in China, there's a lot of people don't realize that there's actually massive pyramids in China from prehistoric civilizations that were built in
Yep.
China, right? And I've even thought one of my little kind of wild theories, but it's like maybe some of these earlier civilizations knew the flood was coming, and instead of going up into the mountains, they went underground. And thinking about it from a pressure point, thinking about the pressure at the bottom of the ocean, right? If there was going to be a massive ocean covering the entire Earth, and you wanted to build some sort of door or some sort of thing to protect you and to protect your entrances to your tunnels going underground, a pyramid type shape would be the perfect structure sitting at the bottom of the ocean to protect to protect the entrances and everything from that pressure. So I thought maybe these pyramids were built, in some sense, right, as a way of protecting something underground or during a massive flood. But anyway, that's just one of my kind of side theories. But
I mean, it's definitely possible, and I think that it's certainly also possible that the pyramid itself represents protecting the knowledge of that civilization, and that perhaps these where I was discussing this with Trevor Grassi, who I did an interview recently. He's a kind of independent Egyptologist. He's friends with the people on the Cafe project that have been out there doing these scans, and this whole idea that perhaps the underground civilization, because in Turkey, right? Listen, just quick little aside in regards to the subterranean underground living. In Turkey, there are so many of these subterranean cities, these ancient subterranean cities. There was one that was found by a guy that was just renovating his house, and he went under the ground and found this entire chasm that opened up into a city that they believe could accommodate around 3,000 people. So, the whole idea of like seeking refuge underground, that's represented in a lot of different areas. But the pyramid itself, I mean, at least the pyramids in Giza, Trevor was saying that he thinks they might be capstones for these kind of global resets, and so it is kind of like a preparatory structure that's been constructed in order to save the knowledge, perhaps keep the people safe as well and save them, but certainly to contain the knowledge, because the pyramid itself, regardless of what might lie below it, and these discussions about the halls of Amenti or the sacred halls of records and antediluvian technology, like potentially sure, like there might be this amazing treasure trove of incredible things to discover below the pyramid. But the pyramids of Giza, specifically, just their very existence is a gigantic scientific time capsule. There's pi encoded into it, the golden ratio encoded into it. Some people even say light speed is encoded into it with the parameters when you do it all and add it all together. The radius of the planet, it's on complete meridian north. It's aligned to the Orion belt. There's actually more things than I can rattle off on the top of my head. There are so many scientific principles, mathematic principles, acoustic principles, sacred and kind of harmonic connecting to the equilibrium of the planet principles that are in play here. So it's almost like the pyramids themselves are the Hall of Records. Like you've got to decode all of these different things that we've inserted into it, and then you'll understand what our culture is. And perhaps they were hoping to survive. And there's a lot of actually evidence around the world of different prehistoric sites that are built to be seismically resistant, to be able to like in Sacsayhuaman, Peru, where you've got these incredible multi-ton cyclopean stones that are fitted together like jigsaw puzzle piece boards, and like no mortar, no binding agent, they just fit together. Can't fit a razor blade between them. And even the local Peruvians and the ancient stories from that culture say that it wasn't the Inca that built Sacsayhuaman in Peru. It was a completely different, far older. There you go, right there. So these incredible stones are fitted together without any mortar, no ancient cement. They just slot together perfectly in very, very strange orientations. And one of the things as well, before I be quiet, is around the world with these megalithic sites, you'll find these nubs. You might be able to find an image of this where if you type in kind of like megalithic nubs, stone nubs, and like all over the world, you've got these stones where there's like a little nub coming out of it, almost like the stone was soft and it was pulled away. And that's where the stone was still being pulled away when the craftsman was finishing with that particular stone. That's one of the theories, because we don't understand how they fitted together these ridiculous stones. There you go. There's one example, but these are everywhere. Everywhere. They're in Peru, in Sacsayhuaman, they're in England, they're in Ireland, they're in Japan, they're in Syria, they're in Greece, they're in every part of the world where you have these very interesting megalithic sites. So there seems to be something to do. Like some people think it's ropes or like holding ropes, but there's a lot of the positions that don't make sense. And yeah, so there's definitely a rabbit hole to fall down in regards to these weird little nubs that seem to be on all these rocks. But yeah, either way, there's so many patterns in the global story, and Egypt represents such a kind of glowing crystal of evidence for that, because even when you get into the differences between architecture in Egypt, there's some questions between dynastic Egyptian architecture and much older architecture, including the pyramids. I think the pyramids are much older personally, and the Sphinx. The Sphinx is basically at this point, I would say, proven. And yeah, I'll shut up. I'll shut up. There's so much to say. I don't want to
Oh,
just
no, there is.
completely overtake.
No, it's great. Well,
So much to say.
and I'm gonna try to keep us on track because my mind's going to 10 different things about, 10
No, for
different,
sure,
things
right?
I've
Like
read,
rein me in when you
like the
have to.
Ica
Like just crack the
stones.
rip.
Like, I'm not sure you've probably looked into the Ica stones. You're familiar with those stones, right? Which is
Yeah,
actually, we'll touch on that quickly because you're talking about Peru. So the Ica stones, um, now they say that these stones were pardon me, an art project by some farmer in like the 60s that he carved these. But what I had heard with these stones is that there was a flood that this farmer in the 60s, and after the flood waters recessed, a cave had opened up, and he found these thousands of these stones that were dated. I've heard sometime 30,000 years ago to different histories, but basically some sort of prehistoric stones. But these stones depict man with dinosaurs. Like they depict, like right
yeah,
here is a stone that looks like an Aztec type man, of a
yeah.
man riding a dragon. Right, there's more of men fighting with dinosaurs. Like there's a stone with
Yeah, I
a
mean, this is one of those
triceratops.
ones. I mean, obviously, like mainstream archaeology and history just dismisses them as fakes, and that's about it. But honestly, there's not much on them. I mean, people will argue that they're evidence of lost ancient civilizations, and the references to medicine and astronomy and potentially even time travel and space exploration, and it's all there. But I don't know enough about them personally in terms of like the storyline, other than the fact that they were being discussed in the 60s by that farmer. But there's so many cases of this. They're called oop arts. I don't know if you've heard of that term, out of place artifacts, oop arts. And there's a whole kind of laundry list of oop arts out there. I did like a kind of top 10 or top 15 at one point. One of the best ones in terms of out of place artifacts is the Antikythera mechanism. Are you familiar with that one?
Is that the bronze mechanism? Is that what it
Yes,
is?
sir. It was found in the Antikytherian Ocean and in a shipwreck, and it's this ancient Greek computer that completely contradicts what they were able to do at the time with gears. Like the gears are incredible, and they're even still today only now finding certain gears with different technologies to X-ray scan and look inside it, because the complexity of the gears wouldn't be seen for hundreds and hundreds of years later, like hundreds of years later. And it's basically considered to be one of the first computers. It works computationally. It could track the solar system, the planets, the stars. There was a lot going on with the Antikythera mechanism, and we don't really, fully know what it was for, but we've got some good ideas. And yeah, it's a technological anomaly. It should not exist based on what we know about ancient Greece. So, what do you want to say about that precursor Atlantean technology that was held on the island of Crete or something and was being taken by boat, and it sunk? And maybe there's only a few of these little artifacts out there. There's certainly no more Antikythera mechanisms that have popped up in Greece, which makes you think it's probably an anomaly, like in terms of a closely kept technology. We're not the only period where there was classified technologies, so it could be some secret scholars working day and night on something from old papers that they've scurried away from the Library of Alexandria or something, but we just don't know. All we know is this thing turns up, we date it, and it makes no sense based on our models for history. Which, what does that say? Well, here's some physical evidence. So what are you going to talk about in terms of our models for history? They clearly need to change. Clearly something needs to alter, because here's physical evidence. This is another interesting one. Some people will debate these because of they'll say that the aging of the rock is millions of years old, or hundreds of thousands of years old.
Are you looking to do something better for your health? Look no further than Kimchi One from Brightcore Nutrition. Kimchi One packs all the fermented nutrition of kimchi in convenient capsules, arming your gut with over 900 unique strains of probiotics supporting gut flora and digestion. I highly recommend this product because all health starts in the gut. So, putting the right fermented superfood in your gut improves every aspect of your health: your skin, your hair, your mental performance, even your beard. Kimchi has even shown to reduce your risk of obesity and promote smaller waistlines. Kimchi One is all natural, made in the USA, and non GMO. Today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers: 25% off with the code Man in America by going to mybrightcore.com/Man in America, or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. Give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi One is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488 with promo code Man in America.
But then the mining tool could have actually fallen down like a crevasse or a crack in the rock. That then that seals back up, and then we dig it up and go, holy shit! There's a hammer inside this 6 million year old granite. So some of these are difficult to know in terms of the dating on them, but they're still very interesting, and they shouldn't be dismissed outright. You know, there are some very interesting anomalies out there from cultures. It's worth talking about.
Well, and what be I want to jump into the Giza
Mm,
Plateau and everything, but just one quick
yeah, yeah, yeah.
story. Of this is, through the research I've done, it seems like whenever some of these ancient artifacts are discovered, the first people that show up are these kind of Men in Black s people working for the
Right.
Smithsonian, right? And that basically the Smithsonian is not just this museum, but actually it's the organization that's responsible for making sure that none of this history is brought out to the people. And one of these instances are these prehistoric sites of giants, right? I mean, maybe not prehistoric, but even these sites from a couple hundred years, a couple thousand years ago of these where giants were buried. And funny enough, I was living in Ohio. There's a guy that we'd hired to do some wood cutting, some tree work for us. He was taking trees down and everything, and talking to him, and he was really into this stuff. And he was telling me, he goes, actually, well, if you look at it, Ohio was a region where there's a lot of references to giants. I think even Lincoln, in one of his speeches, talked about giants in Ohio, right?
I was literally just looking that up because I had the quote in my head and I've just got it up here.
And
So
what
this
is it?
is apparently from Abraham Lincoln, and it's a quote attributed to him when he was doing speeches at Niagara Falls in 1848. And he says, "The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now." Now, I don't know if that is, but that's the internet saying it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. But it's interesting if it is. And I have always wondered about the Native American burial grounds and these big burial mounds that are existing all over America, because there are stories. And I dismissed this early on when I was, beginning my kind of research journeys in the alternative world, but I'm a lot more focused on it now with regards to the Smithsonian and some of the claims around, for example, the Grand Canyon. I don't know if you've looked into some of the weird claims about Egyptian presence in the Grand
Yeah.
Canyon and hieroglyphs and certain areas that were sealed off very early. It's a little bit like, how you get with Roswell with the UFO subject, this 1947 newspaper, report flying saucer lands in the desert. A day later, no, shut up. It was never a flying saucer. It was just a dummy. Like, don't worry about it. Hush, hush. And you get this. It doesn't happen as much now, but you got this back in the day. And it happened with a lot of these things as well. Giant bones discovered in, like Utah Basin, or like hieroglyphics and Egyptian treasures found inside the Grand Canyon. And then it just stops. So there are actually quite a few stories, and some of them have got a little bit of a receipt, in regards to various reports and confirms from different sources on Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon and giant bones. So yeah, I think there might be something to it, like the Nephilim, these ancient stories of something that was larger. Whether it was an alien species like the Anunnaki that came down and became the Sumerian gods and all of that kind of stuff, or whether it was a hominid species that was just a bit bigger and kind of like Neanderthal like. And I'm not sure, but I don't dismiss the idea of giants, like kind of like 10, 14 foot type of giants.
Well, what was interesting is that this guy was talking to me, and he had no reason to lie. I mean, he was just telling me, and so he had this obsession with giants in prehistoric culture, and he said that so he was like really much so like a it's like Appalachian Hills kind of guy, like lived in the woods kind of person. And
Right,
part of what
right.
he would do is he'd go into properties and he'd find these big black walnut trees, which are worth, sometimes, tens of thousands of dollars for these huge slab pieces of walnut. And he would go
Mm.
find these big trees and he'd cut them down and then he'd sell them off to mills and everything. And he was working on this one property in Ohio with this older woman. And he was out there at one point and he told me that there's like a river nearby and he'd found all these artifacts that were from what he believed to be a giant civilization. And then what he also said he found was a burial site where he knew that it was a large burial mound that he was convinced that it must have been a giant burial mound because he had been, again, studying these things for most of his life. Anyway, he went back. He finally had a chance to go back a couple years later when he was going to go back and ask if he could go just do some digging around on this woman's property. And this older woman at that time, she said, "Oh, sorry." She said the Smithsonian already came and they already looked and they didn't find anything, but the
No
Smithsonian came
shit.
to my property. And so it's just like, oh, interesting. So he,
Yeah,
again,
like
he had no
I
reason
don't
to be lying to me. Like, why would he make this up to me, some random guy he's cutting trees down for?
exactly. Like I actually trust those average Joe people more than like the official scientists and people in the government. You know, like there's no vested interest to lie or obfuscate or misdirect with someone who's just cutting down your trees. It's like, listen, dude, I've seen some stuff. Let me tell you about it. It's like I believe that person way quicker than an official representative of the Smithsonian or the Vatican or the government when it comes to this kind of stuff. But the giant thing is interesting. And where I went recently in Malta, that's actually very much in the lore of giants. There's a place called Gozo, the island of Gozo, which is just off of the mainland of Malta. And it's got one of the oldest prehistoric megalithic towers in the world. It's huge and it's called Giant's Tower, and the locals say it was built by giants. And there's a lot of history in the Maltese folklore about giants building these megalithic sites that litter the entire island. And one of the really weird things about Malta, and it does tie into this idea of giants, is and I think they were found at other sites, but very specifically the hypogeum of Halseflieni, one of the weirdest places, honestly, that I've ever been to, for a number of reasons. First of all, this is Giant's Tower, yeah, Gajantia on the island of Gozo. So I was there a few well, 2 months ago now, and absolutely phenomenal stone building. And this is like very weathered and dilapidated at this point. It was much larger, but it's attributed to this giantess who built it with the stones slung over her shoulder and her baby on her back. And it's very strange because the hypogeum specifically, which is this subterranean temple structure, it seems to be the most ancient of the prehistoric temple structures on Malta. All of the ones above ground seem to be mimicking it in terms of the geometry. They seem to be mimicking the hypogeum, but the hypogeum's an underground temple site. And this is something that's another pattern in global subterranean temple structures, is that you usually find a amazing and incredible and wow, what an awe-inspiring temple built above ground, but then below ground there's an older, more sacred, and more advanced site that's a labyrinth of subterranean, tunnels or structures. And you find this again across the world, where you've got a newer like dynastic and empire period temple, but it's constructed on the ground of something that's way more impressive. And so the Hypogeum is like a multi-tier subterranean temple that's literally been dug clear out of the limestone. It's If you can get some images up, it'd be really cool, because like it is fantastic. Hypogeum, spelled Hypogeum, and then Malta, because the stonework is this incredible overlapping kind of arcs. And when I was feeding it into AI to kind of give it a little bit of an analysis, it actually said that it looks like multiple overlapping spherical Helmholtz resonators, which is very interesting, because a Helmholtz resonator is a technology, a device for channeling acoustic waves. And this place has been proven empirically that it's 100% acoustically tuned. It's meant to reverberate, and it's made out of limestone, which is a perfect natural acoustic amplification material. I think about 75% of this place is locked off to the public. Okay, so you can't access about 75% of this entire site. Again, it's multi levels, it's subterranean. And if you do one thing, if you type in Hypergeum Malta human ear, put human ear next to it, there's a fantastic diagram that would be worth putting up because people have looked at this site from like an aerial perspective and they really believe that it's been designed like the human ear with all of these different elements that seem to be leading up to the main area where the oracle chamber sits. And there you go. So like this is actually like a diagram showing the above site, like as if you could pierce through with an X-ray and see the site all the way through. And there's again these similarities to our own ear is pretty strange, but the acoustic tuning has been completely proven. Now, why I bring it up in relationship to the Giants is because inside this place there was a lot of abnormally sized skulls, malformed, elongated skulls. And there's only one of these skulls that's now on exhibition in the Museum of Archaeology in Valletta, in the city of Valletta in Malta. So I went to that. That's in the little promo clip. You can see like the skull. And what's very interesting about these is a lot of people will talk about elongated skulls and obviously they'll refer to head binding, like a tradition of head binding. And yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons why there was elongated skulls, but not these ones, because they lack a critical suture down the top of the head. So every human being has a crack in the skull going across the diagonally and one going vertically, right? These skulls that are in the hypogeum specifically. Now, I can't speak for these ones. I think these are just like elongated skulls that have been found in other places. But the one that's been found and is on display in the Museum of Archaeology in Valletta doesn't have the vertical suture line that every single human skull requires in order to be born. But these skulls were dated to be adult skulls. They weren't baby skulls. So these people, whoever they were living their lives, but they were doing so lacking the critical suture that every human needs for their head to kind of basically stay together. And one of the theories about that was that if these skulls were passing through a wider birth canal, there you go. So there's no vertical. A human skull should have it should basically be forming a T where you see that horizontal line going across. There should be a vertical one going down. These ones don't have that. Now, one of the theories about that is that if it was going through a wider birth canal, it wouldn't require the pressure that our human skull needs to push together. And so, it kind of ties again back into this whole theory and mythos that's on the island of Malta about giants. There you go. There's one for comparison. That vertical suture line going down, and there's clearly there's nothing there, and yeah, it's pretty weird. Now, only one of these skulls is on display, but the claim, and it's even written in the museum, the claim is that dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of these elongated skulls were found in the Hypogeum, but it's a very cloak and dagger story. The original guy died, it got taken over by some official dude, probably representing Smithsonian or
Smithsonian.
something of a similar ilk. And then, of course, with Malta, you've got the Knights of Malta, and there's like a lot of to be honest, like high crime, and like it's a very powerful place. It's like, a lot of offshore tax haven money goes through Malta, and then the Knights of Malta tied to the Vatican and the Holy See. So, there's a lot of like deep esoteric and like powerful hands exchanging in Malta. So yeah, there's a weird story involving that. But yeah, dude, giants, skulls, hypergeums, and acoustic temples. It's all very fascinating stuff.
It is. So, I guess getting to the pyramids, right? Because which is,
Yeah,
obviously
yeah, we
that's
haven't
a
even touched on that. Yeah, we haven't even touched
it's
on
like
it.
we could go for 10 more hours and still not even mention the
Oh,
pyramids,
for
but,
real. Yeah.
um, I mean, I know that you've been kinda on the forefront of helping to take this information from these recent discoveries in the, Giza Plateau and helping to translate, bring it to more people. I think you were on Alex Jones at one point talking about it. So for people that maybe just saw the images, I'll bring up the images actually here.
Yeah.
So people that just saw these pictures going around, they saw Greg Reese's video about it perhaps, and they see, okay, these kind of look like X-ray scans, this various information. There's all kinds of really kind of cool renderings that people have done.
Tons of AI art now that's flooding the matrix with these things, and
Exactly.
yeah,
So walk us through this. I mean, and you interviewed, was it one of the actual scientists that was involved with this, or
yeah. So I interviewed the guy whose patented technological method is responsible for producing the scans, Filippo Bionde. So what the team are claiming, and I fell into this, dude, because I was like the second person to catch wind of this on X. And so I hurriedly put together a video once I kind of absorbed the information and was like, wow, like if this is real, this is insane. And that video, blew up relatively for my channel. I think it's at like just over 500,000 views now, which is just unheard of for my YouTube channel. So that kind of threw me into the middle of it. I'm a researcher of these types of topics, but I'm not, part of the team or an expert on these things. So suddenly everyone's asking me questions. But I did my research, did my homework, and I made sure that I understood what was going on. And the team are claiming, and the scientists involved, by the way, in this project are Corrado Malanga. He's a former professor of organic chemistry at the University of Pisa. And then Filippo Bionde, who's an engineer and a specialist in something called synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, and Doppler technologies, which in simple terms are technologies that analyze frequencies produced by sound or light. And he's Filippo, that is recognized for his geophysical surveys of archaeological sites. He's actually deployed this technology in a few different locations. This is another thing that was brought up by a lot of the skeptics, saying, "Oh, it's untested; it's never been used." That's not true. He has used it. He used it at the Gran Lasso National Laboratory. The Gran Sasso National Laboratory and the Mosul Dam in Iraq. And he claims to have basically developed a a technique, not a technology so much, but a technique for using these technologies, the SAR satellite, the synthetic aperture radar satellite scans, and this Doppler integration. And I can explain what that means in a bit more detail. Basically, through these methodologies, the team who have been deploying these scans on the Giza Plateau claim to have discovered these massive structures beneath the Kaffa Pyramid, which is the middle pyramid of the three on the Giza Plateau. So they believe they've discovered what appear to be these 8 massive cylindrical structures with these downward spiraling features, like these huge columns with spiraling features coming down from the Kaffa Pyramid into the ground. And these structures extend from the base of the pyramid approximately, I think it was something like 630 meters below the ground, each of them. Okay, which then connects into 2 approximately 80 by 80-meter boxes that these columns are like coming down into. And then they go on to say that this appears to represent an element of an even larger subterranean infrastructure that connects across the entire Giza complex, with some of the structural engineering actually reaching up to 2 kilometers below the Earth's surface. Now, that's a crazy claim to make, and it's no surprise that it's kind of caught fire all over the internet and made a lot of people very skeptical. But yeah, they did like a 4-hour presentation. They released a lot of information in a 4-hour presentation. That was all in Italian. So you did have to kind of sit there and, try and understand the subtitles as best as you could, which weren't brilliant. Everything was being done in Italian. And I think the way in which it was released is one of the reasons why I got so much skepticism, man. Like, I mean, obviously the claims themselves are that's going to introduce skepticism, especially in academia. But I think the general public in the Anglosphere, it wasn't so well received. And I heard a lot of people commenting this, and I have to agree with them. A lot of people who were Italian were like, listen, guys, like these are old school Italians, okay? They're old school Italian scientists. They don't really understand our world, our, kind of like marketing culture. They're not American in that kind of way of presenting that information. They literally were asked if they could present the stuff, and they were like, sure, yeah, you can present the stuff. They gave it to a couple of people, and it looked really weird because these random researchers who had like 10 followers were putting out this stuff, and it turns out they were friends of the researchers. And so it was released in a funny way, and that activated skepticism. But then I got an interview, and luckily this is in English. This is the first interview that Filippo Bionde did in English. And Armando May, who's another researcher and Egyptologist and journalist, he's on the team. They both joined me for a talk very recently, a few days ago, which is on my YouTube channel. And they explain it. They explain the methodologies. Filippo Bionde goes into this kind of like SAR Doppler integration technology. And one thing I'll say real quick is that so many of the skeptics, and this really annoyed me actually, a lot of the skeptics were saying, oh, well, this technology can't penetrate 2 kilometers below the earth. There's no way, there's no possibility that this could even be done, because that's a sci-fi technology that doesn't exist. And they're right, that can't happen, but that's not what the team are proposing they're doing. Filippo Bionde is proposing this different method that he patented in 2022, and they already deployed it on the Great Pyramid of Giza, and they found subterranean tunnel networks that were then validated and shown to be there. And the mainstream media dropped the ball on that back in 2022 and didn't report on it, because it's just like these small time Italian researchers that, nobody's paying attention to. And now they've done it again. And like I said, he already had a portfolio with like the Mosul Dam and Gran Sasso Laboratory penetrating down. Like the Gran Sasso Laboratory is inside a mountain, and they've managed to create a diagram of the laboratory using this technology. So basically, the last thing I'll say is that essentially, instead of penetrating 2 kilometers into the rock, which is what they're not doing, they're scanning the subsurface of the ground, literally like 30 centimeters or less into the ground. And what they're doing is they're reading for vibrations, acoustic vibrations, vibrations that are coming up from structures below the ground. And so they were doing, I think they did like 200 tomographies over a year with two separate satellite companies and two completely like different scanning techniques that were being used by these different companies, using this integration of the Doppler technologies that Beyonde had patented, and they kept coming up with the same results. Each time they were using different methods and different like versions and different scans, same results. These spirals, these weird spirals kept popping up, these structures that were around the plateau. So yeah, it seems like a lot of the skepticism essentially is based on a misinterpretation of the technology being deployed, assuming it's a conventional synthetic aperture radar, but it's actually synthetic aperture radar Doppler integration X band microwave, beyond these special recipe, which again activates skepticism, because, well, who's Beyond and why does he have a special recipe to do this? But the proof is in the portfolio that he's already got online. And one last thing, my bro, and then I really will shut up. You can find his website, www.harmonicsar.com. Harmonic SAR.com. And that's where he has his proof of concept and information about the Gran Sasso Laboratory and, Mosul Dam, Iraq. And there you go. See, and they're using it for bridges as well, for structural integrity on bridges, as you can see there. So this is a demonstrable technology. He's using it, he's deploying it. The only difference is that he's deployed it on the pyramids, and it's super controversial to find these things on the pyramids, right? So there's why the firestorm got activated. But, proof of concept right there on his website.
Well, what's interesting is that I have come to the conclusion, I'm sure you have too, that the vast majority of what we think about and how we perceive our world has been manufactured. That we have been similar to, say, a what is it? I think there's the idea of 3 generations of an animal built, that's kind of caged will actually no longer remember what it's like outside the cage, right? There's different
Right,
analogies
right.
of like that. Or if you're trying to domesticate an animal, it takes 3 generations to domesticate an animal from it, getting rid of its wildness. Well, we're under, probably dozens and dozens of generations where our history has been modified. Some of these events going back, 600 or 1,000 years, the shaping of our worldview. And so I really try to keep that in mind and not come to the table with any notions about how things work. And it's tricky
Right.
because there's a lot of fake stuff out there. There's a lot of bogus theories, and like if people are like, oh, when are the med beds coming? It's like, well,
Yeah.
go ahead and buy your first your past the med bed that's going to come. It's going to heal you of everything all of a sudden, right? There's these ideas that have been put out there, and I think a lot of it is fake. And so you can't just forget everything and think, okay, I'll believe any theory. But I've tried to keep my own grounded, kind of rooted beliefs, but at the same time, look at everything with an open mind. And I find it to be very helpful. And so when I'm thinking about these types of topics, anything that comes out that questions one of the foundational structures that make up our worldview, it's instantly rejected, right? It's part of it. There's a healthy aspect to that we have this normalcy bias. It creates a world that we can live in and exist in, and if all of a sudden we realize all these things all at once, for a lot of people they can't handle it. It breaks their realities. So there's a mechanism to keep us safe, which I see its merit. However, that mechanism is also a cage, or it's a box, right? That entraps us. And so when I'm looking at these things, I'm trying to look at it truly with an open mind and think about, okay, what's really going on there? And that's been helpful for me. I think I've been able to learn a lot about the world and understand a lot of prehistorical or ancient civilization type information through a lens that I can make sense of. And so when I look at the pyramids, and I guess this is a question for you, taking this, say, not even a 10,000 foot view, like the million-foot view of this, how do you make sense of all this? Like when you see this information coming out about the pyramids, it wasn't just a one-off for you. Like, you've been studying ancient cultures and hidden and prehistoric civilizations and, various aspects of that for quite some time. So when you see this information coming out about the pyramids, what do you think it is? Was yeah, I guess, yeah, what do you think it is? What's down there? What was its purpose? Who do you think made it? And obviously, we're speculating, but you kinda have to because the truth's been hidden so much, it's all you have is speculation.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I have ideas. Obviously, I don't know, but I have ideas. Obviously, there's the idea of the Hall of Records or the Hall of Amenti. This type of sacred knowledge that's been stored away, um, or an initiation path. The whole thing with ancient Egypt, even with the dynastics, which we shouldn't dismiss. They were incredible. Like the reign of the pharaohs and amazing, and their entire life was lived preparing for death. Like they understood that it was a profound journey that one is taking to move from this veil to another. And I still think that regardless of the connections between the pyramids and dynastic Egyptians, whether they built them, it seems like the pyramids had a similar function esoterically, even with the science involved. So I do think that they're evidence of, in all honesty, like a type one civilization, or a close to a type one civilization. What I mean by that is that you've got the Kardashev scale, which is the scale of kind of using energy on a civilization. So type one, a civilization would be using all of the planetary energy. A type two civilization uses all of its stars energy, sun's energy, and a type three uses the galaxy's energy, which is kind of incomprehensible to any of us. But close to approaching, maybe at type one. I think that that's what we're looking at. I know that's really crazy for some people to think of, especially because it's not evidenced in some sort of amazing Star Trek style representation. It's not anti gravity technology and flying saucers. It's ancient megalithic stone and rose quartz granite and acoustic engineering and geometry and cymatics and reverberation and the things that Nikola Tesla said were the secrets of the universe, right? Vibration and motion and oscillation and energy. These are the secrets of the universe. And so it feels like they were tapping into the planet's energy, like putting these things on very specific locations, very specific orientations to in some way draw energy up from the planet and disperse it in a fashion for some form of use. What that use was is what really gets me. Like, what were they actually doing this for? And one of my weirder thoughts about it is that you have this whole idea of like the great year with the, I think like 24,000 years, and the axis of the planet shifts. And when that happens, boom, like the whole basically surface level of the planet gets ripped to shreds, and you'll reset. Before then, there's also a solar maximum where you have this, potential X-class event from the sun, which could completely devastate all of our electronics. So it's almost like you've got this, if it turns out to be completely kind of on point with these cycles, which it certainly seems to be, and there's a lot of historical reference to these cycles and intelligence agency interested in the idea of cataclysmic cycles. The CIA was very interested in that. But if you look at it, you get this solar maximum and then a planetary axis shift. Okay, so what if what if there was a civilization that was very similar to our own at one point, that was completely devastated by a solar event, and it completely knocked out all of our ability to produce anything electronically? We were reset. We had to find a different way. And this is all just a completely, like, this is a fantasy idea. Don't take me too seriously here. I'm just having fun with it. But at the same time, think about it. So they have to find a different route, a different method of preserving their energetic capacities, their energetic capabilities. Now, one of the things that's interesting is that although a massive solar event, a huge geostorm, a Carrington event would wipe out our electricity, would wipe out all of the telephone wires and the satellites, all of that, it's gone, ground zero. But the energetic materials of the planet don't get taken out of commission. So the piezoelectric capabilities of rose quartz granite and the acoustic amplification of limestone, these things are still preserved. And so what if this was like a learning curve where it was like, right, we don't do that route. Now we have to do it through the natural methods that won't be deactivated. And also we have to take into account that there's a massive seismic event that's going to happen. And when you see things like the Sacsayhuaman place in Peru, where you've got the seismically resistant materials, and that's represented globally in many other places, it's like they were preparing for both a massive geological trauma with some form of seismic events they're trying to maintain their structures with, and also the use of geoenergetic materials on telluric fault lines and specific nodal points on the planet. It just feels like it's technology. It just feels like it's energetic. And the pyramids are like this crown jewel of that, because you've got all of the scientific elements incorporated and then just the engineering feat in general. It is completely contradictory to everything else about the dynastic Egyptian period. It doesn't make any sense, even with spiral staircases and crazy stuff underground removed. Just the pyramids alone, they still don't make sense. They still don't have a good explanation for how they were built. And when you look at the difference between, for example, I don't know if you've been to Egypt, but I've been to the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens, where they buried a lot of the pharaohs and the queens, adorned with gold, adorned with hieroglyphs. It's absolutely the place where you would be burying the most sacred and regal of your people. You go into the pyramids where they were supposed to be buried, and there's not a single hieroglyph. In fact, the only hieroglyph is like a piece of chicken scratch that someone had put on there, and Zahi Hawass used that as the attributor to the pharaoh that was put in there. He was like, "Oh well, there you go. Like that's Khufu's hand signature." It's like, okay, on a completely desolate building with no other scriptures on it, and then the place where he's buried in the king's chamber is devoid of any artwork and is just like this rose quartz granite box in the middle of the pyramid. And one of the things about rose quartz granite, and especially the fact that this is quarried from Aswan, which is 500 miles away, like, these gigantic multi-ton, huge, perfectly cut rose quartz blocks. I mean, we're talking blocks the size of my room that were just fitted together perfectly in the apex of the pyramid. So, like, not at the bottom. This was lifted to the top, and it sits in like the apex of the pyramid. Sorry, not the apex, the center, the apex of the top, like the center of the pyramid, right? So they had to lift this stuff up and engineer these huge stone blocks. And then, obviously, the energetic components of that. The rose quartz is a highly energetic material, and the whole place, including the sarcophagi, is made out of this rose quartz. It's actually smoothly leading up into this sarcophagi, which I've personally lied down inside. And it's a weird feeling when you're inside the center of like the center, because Egypt is the center, the pyramid is on the central axis, and then you're kind of like in the axis mundi of that, which is like the central point of the pyramid. And it's a very trippy experience, but there's no way that this is a burial chamber. Not when you see what the burial chambers around the entire country are like. There's just no way. It's actually really insulting. Like, once you stray off the path a little bit and start questioning it and look at it, it's really insulting what they try and get us to believe is the narrative for our history. It's like children shit. It's terrible. It's
It
really
is.
bad.
It is. It's an insult to our intelligence, and
It is, man.
and,
Yeah.
and that's what And I'm glad that you've gone into some of your more hypotheses or kind of
Yeah,
theories,
man.
because that's the purpose of even having this conversation. Is I have no idea, and you have no idea what's really going on with these ancient
Nope.
civilizations, but we're smart, and we should at least be having these conversations and saying, "Well, why would they
I
possibly
think
do
I think
that?"
one
Right?
th- one thing I would say is, like, we both have no idea what's going on, that's for sure, but it definitely is not what we're being told. Like
There you
that, I
go. I know it's not that.
100% though. Like, I know it's not that, which makes me very interested in why you're telling me it's that. when it's something else. You know what I mean? Like that really gets me itching on why it is. And then when you look it into it and it seems so advanced, you start going, okay, all right, so what is it then? What is it that's really getting them ruffled up about this previous time? And it makes me think, well, maybe we were so advanced, maybe we were at such an incredible level that it's quite dangerous to let us know that now that we're in such a frankly sick society and corrupted and in trouble, and we really need to get into a better position of consciousness. So maybe that's dangerous information for this human species to know in regards to the controlling elements of this world, looking at that information and going, no, they're not ready for it. Unless we're going to put it through Indiana Jones, we'll call up Steven Spielberg and get him to make another film so that we can kind of layer it into the consciousness. Yes, the Nazis were going to Nepal. Yes, they were interested in the Ark of the Covenant, but we'll just put that through Hollywood so you don't blow out your brain too quickly.
Yeah, it wasn't the CIA using remote viewing to find it. It was
No.
Hitler seeking after the Ark of the Covenant, and
Yeah, like yeah, no, I
yeah,
mean that's a whole fascinating thing, like how it's dribbled in through Hollywood, how it's dribbled in through social programming, like these ideas, and I think that is done purposefully. I mean, without a doubt, when you watch Indiana Jones or something like here you've got an OSS officer. So OSS was the precursor to the CIA, so that was a real thing, and they really did have OSS officers going out around the world hunting down Nazis because the Nazis, especially in the higher levels of the SS, were really interested in esoteric artifacts. And they genuinely were going around the world to places like Tibet and Nepal and Peru, trying to find sacred artifacts that they believed were powerful. And they've set up all these weird occult groups like the Vril Society and Anna Nerba and the Thule Society. And, I studied like Nazi German history at at college for like a module. None of that's ever mentioned. Like this whole part of like esoteric espionage, but it's told through Indiana Jones. And of course, it's dramatized. I'm not saying it's like a documentary, but it's pretty much on the mark of what was going on. And you have to ask the question, why? Why were they looking for these things?
yeah, it's like even getting into some of the, why do we go into some of these wars, right? What is it
Yeah,
with the discovery of some of these ancient tablets in Iraq, and all of a sudden,
exactly.
oh, hey, we're going to send our
Yeah,
troops in
oh,
there, and
yeah, yeah,
oh, the
yeah.
museums got raided of all these ancient artifacts, and
Yeah. Yeah,
but I
there's
think that
definitely like whatever the true reason for Iraq was, that's definitely one of the reasons, in my opinion, was like, wow, while we're here, let's get those artifacts, like, let's get those
yeah,
tablets of Gilgamesh.
exactly. But I think what it
Yeah,
is though is that what they want us to believe is that we are just these evolutionary meat sacks, and that a billion years ago I was just this. I'm like my great 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 grandpa was some monkey that was had evolved from
right.
a an aquatic animal. Like that's what they're trying to tell us. Which and that's a big part of this because if you look at the narrative that they've pushed, all this information, it destroys their entire narrative,
Yeah,
even from the perspective of evolution. Well, if you look at okay, evolution, that's also what reinforces that idea that we are the most advanced right now, that we've evolved through this, and it also fits into the whole transhumanist, perspective. Is that well, the next layer of evolution is the merger of man plus machine, and chips in our heads, and robots and all this kind of stuff. Because I think that you go back to this, and even it's kind of interesting. You look at Elon Musk, who's really represents. He's like the pinnacle of human intelligence, and I haven't once heard him mention Tesla's energy or mention ether or mention anything involved with. Or let alone getting into some of the things you find when you look into Tartaria and you see the all the different obelisks and not obelisks, but the different structures on the roofs. And were they harnessing energy? And what about electroculture? How about, how is it that you can wrap this copper
yeah,
around a stick and your plant grows 3 times the size, which we've done before. I've literally done it in my own garden.
yes,
We've had kale
yes,
leaves that were 3 feet tall after we put in
100%.
electroculture
Yeah,
stuff. And it's just like, I'm pretty sure that Elon is just as much keeping us in this cage of information, convincing us that okay, the only way to advance is through microchips and through harnessing the sun's energy through these massive solar fields and everything. So anyway, it's I
yeah.
enjoy
Well,
having
I
these
was
discussions though.
I was interested by his weird little photo of his bedside table. I don't know if you saw that because I can't remember the actual term for this object, but it's like an ancient Sanskrit object, like a Vedic Indian artifact that he has sitting on his bedside table. If you type in like Elon Musk's bedside table, it will come up because it's like the most popular photo of it, where he's got his gun and a Diet Coke. And this object, I really wish I had the name in my head right now, but it's a very powerful esoteric symbol. And some believe it was actually a Vedic weapon. And if you look at the Sanskrit texts, there's a lot of talk about almost what seems like, wars between the gods. And this was meant to be a weapon or a tool of profound energy. There you go. It says Buddhism ritual object,
Of
but it's
course.
actually got a very very real name that I'm also making a fool of myself with right now. But it's venerated throughout that kind of like area, and you'll find it represented in temples and all over the place. So it's interesting. He's definitely got some esoteric sense to him, but I think he's I don't know, man. Like, his opinions on consciousness I found to be very reductive. He was speaking with Lex Friedman, and I remember him saying they were talking about the idea of local versus non-local, the idea that consciousness can extend its influence beyond the body, or is it just restricted to the brain? And he said, "Oh well, if I got a baseball bat and I bashed your head in, it would damage the consciousness. So you damage the brain, you damage consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is generated by the brain." And I was like, "That's really reductive because if I took a radio that's playing music and smashed the radio up, that doesn't destroy the frequency that's being sent to the radio. It just destroys the radio's ability to transmit that frequency." So I would say the same about the brain, that the brain is like a transmitter and renderer and interpreter of energy, and that energy is actually you. And that energy goes way beyond the human body. I think it goes to every point in time and space instantaneously, and you're just simply represented as a localized little coordinate in time and space called a human being. But ultimately, that's just a reference point, and you are a much larger puppeteer, my friend. We all are, and we're all interacting on that matrix together.
I'm with you on that. As we're closing up, I know you've got a documentary coming out, which I'll play in
Yes,
the
sir.
background. Speaking of Malta, and
Mm.
so tell us about this.
Yeah, I wanted to go out there because it was a place that I've been, doing a bit of research into as I was going through these prehistoric areas around the world that have a lot of evidence that's questionable. And Malta just kept popping up, and especially like I said, the Hypogeum, which is a fascinating place, and then these other structures that were built above ground that seem to be mimicking it. And they date the Hypogeum back to like 5,000 years because that's essentially where they have to cut off the timeline because it starts getting weird. But it seems to be much older than that. The entirety of Malta, I mean, some people say that Malta itself is like a geopolymer, like the island itself was constructed. And it is weird because, regardless of whether it's contemporary or ancient, the entire place is full of subterranean tunnels, World War II bunkers or ancient structures that nobody can really tell you who was the builder of. And so I went there and I filmed the whole place. I went across the entirety of Malta. I went to Gozo, and it's basically the most concentrated location of prehistoric structures. And once again, what do you see? Here's those skulls where you're missing that crack. So there should be a vertical suture line going down that skull, and it is lacking that line. And what you see around this entire place again is the same that you see all over the world. You see celestial alignments, you see precision engineering, you see massive stone structures, and you see a lot of evidence of advanced knowledge and sophistication that we just do not attribute to these people in the traditional models, in the traditional narratives. So, I think it's important to go out and do these things because there's just not enough documentary evidence that I feel has got like that new contemporary look. And like, so I wanted to try and do something that was stylized and interesting and eye catching. And I'm working on it right now, and hope to be putting it out in at least a couple of months. But yeah, it's a place in the world that's been a crossroads for civilizations for thousands of years. You had the Phoenicians, the Greeks, you had the Arabs, you've had everyone crossing through Malta. It's a crisscross of entirety of history. And yeah, giants, elongated skulls, massive subterranean temples, precision engineered above ground temples. The whole place is very mysterious. And then you got the Templars, and there's a lot of esoteric reference throughout the entire place. So yeah, that's kind of my big project. This Giza stuff happened, and I had to like suddenly jump on that, and I'm balancing between editing up this essentially my first attempt at a feature level production, and doing all of my daily tasks to keep things going. But yeah, it's a passion project, and I can't wait to put it out.
Well, it's great, man. Well, thank you for what you're doing. I'll encourage people to check you out on Twitter. This is your
Thank you,
YouTube
sir.
channel here. I'll put your links in the description for the show. Here's your Twitter channel. It's at the Project Unity, And then again, on YouTube, just search for Project Unity. It's also
Yeah.
at Project Unity. I'll make sure those links are in the description as well. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
again, just thank you for your time. It's
Pleasure.
I feel like we could just spend hours talking, which we'll do more of
Every
these
time.
shows together.
Yeah.
But
And
this
I'd be
is
happy to come back. And if you want to come on my show, we can, talk for longer. I love this stuff. Like this is where I really just enjoy the free flow of conversation. And you're a great host.
well, thank you, thank you. Yeah, podcast is I'm really it's my favorite medium because
Yeah.
it's unscripted, and you can throw things at me that I wouldn't expect and vice versa, and I can ask you
Hmm.
questions, and, people can they can read our body language, they can read our vocal language, our tones and everything,
Exactly.
and they feel like, "Oh, okay, these guys don't have an agenda, and they're just 2 guys that are sitting down, kinda banging some rocks together, banging our heads together and saying, 'How do we make sense of this crazy planet?'" So, it's,
That's it, man. Yeah, I
yeah.
think I think the long form, like there's less room for misinterpretation. Whereas media sound bites, it can just be rejigged into something that wasn't even representative of the conversation. Whereas like and also I think it just shows that regardless of how much people are talking about the degradation of attention span, which is an issue and like certainly does need to be looked at, people are intelligent. People are willing to digest long format content, and when it's enjoyable and interesting, people like Joe Rogan are proof of this. Millions and millions of people tune in, way more than the mainstream legacy media. So I think we're in a turning point with the alternative media space, and I'm certainly happy to be playing some form of a small role in that.
Oh, me too. It's occasional I'll see these comments and people will say, "This is too long. Can you make it a 5-minute clip?" I'm just thinking, "You're on the wrong channel."
Yeah, that's
Go
what I say as
go
well,
watch
man.
Fox
You just
News if
gotta
you want that.
exactly. You just gotta smile and be like, whatever, it's
Yeah,
cool. Yeah,
exactly. Well, Jay, thanks again,
yeah.
man. It's
It-
really good speaking with you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Numbers don't lie. The impact that Balance of Nature makes every single day is astounding. You can see the numbers for yourself at their website, balanceofnature.com. So, listen to these stats concerning Balance of Nature's worldwide success. More than 1,000 success stories are reported each month, hundreds of thousands of customers worldwide, millions of orders delivered each year, and billions, yes, billions of fruits and veggie supplements consumed by people who've decided to start living better. There's only one number missing. That's you. Do what I did and add yourself to these numbers. Start taking Balance of Nature's whole food supplements, like so many others around the world. Here's another number that should get your attention: 35%. Use my discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping and their money back guarantee. You must use my discount code SETH. So call them at 800-2468-751 and use the discount code SETH, or order online at balanceofnature.com. Use discount code SETH to get 35% off plus free shipping.